Hello and welcome to Rotted Reviews, and today I want to talk about the 2018 movie Starfish. So this movie popped up on Shudder and I decided to go ahead and give it a watch, give it a review, and I will be absolutely honest with you, this movie flummoxed me. This is a review that's coming in a little bit late. I kind of wanted to get it out Thursday morning, and instead it's going to be more of a Thursday evening thing as far as my time zone goes. And the reason for that is I've been honestly struggling to try and find the words for what to say about this movie. It elicited a lot of feelings, but to be able to actually put that into language and discuss the movie in any kind of critical sense has been a little bit, honestly, difficult. Nevertheless, I think I found the words that I want to speak here, and I'm just going to go ahead and get going with this. So in this movie, we have the character of Aubrey, and we get introduced to her as she's attending the funeral of a friend. People are asking her questions, so forth. She basically is just not, she's not having it. She just wants to mourn and get the fuck out. And in doing so, she does. She gets out. She breaks into her recently dead friend's apartment to try and kind of, connect with the relationship that they had. While in the apartment, she goes ahead and makes herself a little bit at home there, feeds the pet jellyfish and the pet tortoise and so on, and falls asleep. When she wakes up, though, the world has been covered in snow. Not a whole lot, it's not, day after tomorrow or anything, but it is covered in snow. And things seem to be just a little bit off. There's smoke in the background, so on and so forth. She's trying to figure it out, and she finds out pretty soon after she steps out the door that things are out there. What kind of things, what's the nature of things, so on and so forth, is kind of the rest of the movie, and I don't want to get into that, not only because of spoilers, but because it actually kind of gets into the difficulty of what I was going to say about this movie. I'm going to go ahead and make two claims right now that are both true to me and somewhat contradictory to one another, but here they are. The first of which is this. Starfish is one of the most visually stunning movies I have seen this year. The second of which is, I don't really recommend this movie. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about the visuals real quick here, just to get it out of the way, but this really had some of the finest cinematography and set dressing I have ever seen. Everything about it was just gorgeous to behold. It all looked like it was, I don't know exactly what era this movie took place in, but it looked like it came out of a 1970s, 1980s Land's End or LL Bean catalog. But the fine details of the oddities and so forth, especially in her friend's apartment, it really brought the world to life. It really was just one of the most detailed and meticulous films I've ever seen in this regard, and just hats off to the visuals of this movie. Another thing is the effects, creature effects, whatever you want to call it. Not anything earth-shattering, but at the same time was actually done pretty well, and some cleverness, some real good imagination going on there. And without getting into the L word every single time a monster shows up on the screen, some interesting Lovecraftian elements to it too. So why don't I recommend it? What is going on here? I think that comes down to two things, two major things. That is storyline and pacing. The pacing in this movie is atrocious. It was really tough. Honestly, it took about half an hour. The way I describe things, we had the funeral, break into the Fred's apartment, so on and so forth. But as far as any of the rest of it goes, it took about half an hour to really get off the ground and find its feet. And for an hour and 40-minute movie, to take half an hour to get to the fucking point was a little bit tough. It honestly took way too long to get off the ground. And when it did, the character's first inclination, okay, well, now we have the situation. Now we know what's at stake. Now we know what the score is and how to go about the rest of the plot. What are we going to do about it? We're going to take a nap. That's pretty much how it went. Half an hour to get to the fucking point. We now had what was going on, the stakes and the conflicts and the how to go about things. And she decides to stop. She takes a nap. She spends the next untold amount of time breaking into the rest of the food until it's all gone, and then basically forces her out the door. For something that was so visually compelling, it's hard to think of a less compelling storyline. And speaking of the story, I'm not going to get into any kind of spoilers, but what I will say is this is the part that I really had trouble with as far as the critical vocabulary of the movie goes. Oftentimes, horror movies will operate on a base level and a subtext level. It's one of the reasons that my score has plot and subtext as one kind of category there. Movies don't always have to have subtext. Sometimes they can just be a wild romp with slashers and so on and so forth, and that's perfectly fine. But sometimes they do like to have subtext. Sometimes they do like to have a story underneath the story. Sometimes you have a zombie movie that's about anti-commercialism. Sometimes you have a father running amok story that's about alcoholism and addiction. Sometimes you have something that is below the surface so that somebody can enjoy the storyline on the surface, but if they have an emotional connection to the subtext, it has a deeper meaning for them, and it lends itself to a lot more conversation. And the reason I'm laying all this verbal groundwork is to say that Starfish doesn't have the top layer. It seems to all be about subtext. It seems to all be about this emotional connection while weird fragmented shit happens and it forgets to actually have a top layer storyline. It has the premise, and she takes a nap, and she kind of meets it head on. And again, not spoilery, but it doesn't really spend a whole lot of time dealing with the story that it presents to the audience. Instead, every step of the way is met with pauses and reflections and backtracking of hallucinations and all sorts of stuff that does get pretty clever, but it's really all subtext. It's all fleshing out who this character is, what happened to her in the past, and how it relates to what's going on to her now. It doesn't actually have anything to do with what's going on the top layer to move the story forward. And one of the great things about multi-layered films there is if you can enjoy the top layer storyline, but you miss the subtext, that's fine. You can still enjoy a movie. But what happens when a movie is nothing but subtext and you still miss it? What is it then? For me, it was a bit of a missed opportunity. I don't know what this movie was trying to say. I got a lot of the pieces. I put a lot of the pieces together. I figured out a lot of the backstory through inflection and assumptions and so on and so forth, the references of the odd visuals to try and piece things together. But as far as what it was actually trying to say, if there was a storyline under the storyline of the storyline that didn't really exist, I don't know. It was visually interesting. It had weird shit. It was cool. It had some very, very smart meta Charlie Kaufman-esque moments in it. But I still didn't really get what it was trying to say. For me, it was like reading a letter that was entirely encrypted, and I did not have the keys. Typically, the keys to unlock this kind of subtext, this encrypted message underneath the surface, is that emotional connection. Sometimes it's elusive, sometimes not quite so much. Sometimes the subtext actually does such a shitty job of hiding itself, it feels like a slap in the face. But most times, it's at least there enough that if you have an emotional connection with what it's trying to say, you're going to pick up on it and it's going to resonate with you. And I just didn't have that with this one. Whatever its message was too elusive for me to pick up on, and without that top level storyline, I didn't have anything to latch onto. And so now I'm going to go ahead and throw out the scores. As always, 4 different categories, each one worth up to 25 points for a total possible score of 100 points. And as you can see, the technical just knocks it right out of the park. I have no issues with that at all. But the plot and the intention are what really kind of suffer in this. I do think that it should have spent more time with the story that it started. I think it should have cultivated it more. I think it should have spent a little bit less time with the abstract bizarre and the pauses and the pacing issues that it had, and more time just delivering us a fascinating movie. And then if you're going to have the oddball shit happening underneath that can actually resonate with us on an emotional level and get us talking about what the movie actually meant, cool. But the top layer is so critically important. Yes, some filmmakers can pull it off. Yes, David Lynch can pull it off sometimes, but not everybody can do it, and certainly not all the time. And I think in this case, it just didn't land for me. So this puts me in a really weird place. On one hand, I kind of want to shout from the rooftops, go and watch one of the most visually compelling movies of the year. But I still have trouble recommending it. So I'm just going to go ahead and leave it up to audience choice on this one. If you're in the mood to try and unlock a puzzle that I couldn't, And if you're also in the mood to watch some just amazing visuals, set design, camera work, lighting work, all of that, then yeah, on that basis, I do recommend 2018's Starfish. If you're wanting a straightforward, linear horror movie that you can jump at and huddle around with and just enjoy a storyline, I would say that this is one to steer away from. So that should about do it. Thank you very, very much for joining me here today. I look forward to seeing you on my next review. Remember, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.